Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Heresy Hammer. So we've just broken another. There's so many emergency glass podcast shows that we've got, and I suspect this is going to be the same on Friday as well, because I suspect there's going to be a rules drop then. In fact, it was hinted at in the community article that's just dropped, because today we are talking about tactical statuses, and they've given us a little bit more information about tactical statuses. Not sure if that's the correct plural of it. Status and we're going to talk about today, and we're going to draw out what we've learned, and I guess the implications of what they could mean in game. I think, though, it is interesting. We just started a conversation, and we were like, "Okay, no, wait, let's just stop and let's have this in front of people," which is that the 4 new tactical statuses are. In many ways, we kind of had those before, in the sense that it was just either failing a morale check or pinning. And what they've done is, pinning exists as it is, so things can still be pinned, and we'll get back into that in a second. But do you feel like will add more admin to the game, or is it just like, no, it's just like
My initial gut feeling is that, yeah, it probably will, but then... I don't know. Like, we're just getting snippets of information, aren't we? Because, like you say, like being pinned is now, you might not be pinned, you might be stunned. Whereas before you were just pinned, but you still had the admin of remembering that unit was pinned, and then everything that came with it. I have literally just glanced through the article as I got home from picking my kids up. So. I think it's one of those things that once you've played like 5 or 6 games, it'll just become second nature.
Yeah.
I think coming from one of the hard things of going from one edition to the next is you keep remembering rules from the old edition. And then you have to keep reminding yourself, no, pinned does this now, because they use the same words, which I understand, but then. If you've spent 3 years using pinned as one thing and now it does something else, sometimes it's almost better to just completely change the names. Obviously, then people moan, "Oh, they've changed this completely." But
but actually, then it does. You're not hanging on to
that link in your brain isn't attached to the old rules, if you know what I mean. But
that makes sense. I think I think in those initial games you're gonna be checking characteristics quite a lot, because I think the benefit of just having one leadership
and also just quickly remembering which characteristic to check against which status. That's
we will come towards that in a discussion a little bit later on. But I suppose the thing about first and second edition is because pinning and leadership were checked just against leadership, and you took the highest leadership in the main, and there were like modifiers to that. And somebody on a previous video made a good point. They were like, we were talking about modifiers as if they're a brand new thing, but you had like stubborn and fear and leadership buffs and Primarchs giving +1 leadership. Like these debuffs and buffs to leaderships and things like that just all existed from before. That's not really changed.
And that will be interesting, because if we still have stubborn, if we still have fearless, that will then. I think the trouble is a lot of what happens. We had it in 7th edition 40k, first edition Heresy. We had it in Heresy 1.5. We had it in Heresy 2nd edition. Like, you get a rule, and you read that rule, and then you're fine. Then you add something else onto that rule, and you're like, okay. And then you add something else onto that rule, and then you add something else onto that rule, and then you just forget it, because you're like, fuck, what does that thing?
Lots of rules, that
unit does that, which counters that, and that thing does that, which counters that, and you just end up forgetting it. I think that is I wouldn't say fear, but that's what could potentially happen from this is you just add rules on top of rules on top of rules, whereas you have something that's quite basic. And then you add a special
with the previous, like with just the leadership, I suppose you could just kind of like you just having one number So anyway, well, we could talk about this for a while, but let's get into the nitty gritty of it, and it'd be good to hear your thoughts about it, whether you think more numbers are good or bad. But so they gave us more information, and what they did was they explained what each of these tactical statuses actually do. And we were kind of talking in the last episode as if suppressed was a -1 to ballistic skill. And actually, I don't know why we were discussing it like that. We just assumed it was that. And then it actually seems to be the case. So pinned, the status reflects a unit that has been forced to take cover in the face of overwhelming firepower or a sudden crack of a sniper's rifle. And they said explicitly with pinned that it stops you from moving. So it doesn't look like it's going to be any minus to ballistic skill. If you are pinned, it's going to stop you from moving. So that is a significant change, I guess, because the fact that units look like they might be able to still shoot at their full BS even if they're pinned.
Yeah.
So suppressed status reflect a unit that is distracted and confused by heavy enemy fire, environmental effects, or psychological warfare. And it says that it said specifically in the article, it made shots fly wide. Now, whether this is a -1 to ballistic skill or whether this is just forces you to snap fire, it's unclear at this moment in time. But yeah, so I guess we will just have to wait and see whether there's any kind of like, it might be like suppressed 1 or something like that, right? So it might just be, affect ballistic skill in certain ways. Stunned, and the words they specifically used, so the stunned status reflects a unit rendered insensible or stopped in its tracks by the sheer force of its impact, explosion, or other battlefield event. Yes. And that stunned hampers reactions. So it could stop you from doing reactions, or maybe again, like it's a reaction, but perhaps you're snap shooting. So the word hampering that's quite a nebulous word about exactly what that means in reality for like those reactions, right? So you might fail the check, and we're just assuming, because for each of these pinned, suppressed, and stunned, I think we're assuming from the article, but it's a little bit complicated the way that they worded it at the end. Pinned, suppressed, and stunned happen against the cool check, and that's what the cool number represents. And if you fail that, one of these three things happens depending on the weapon or depending on the situation or the environmental effect.
I mean, the other thing I take from that is reactions are still in the game.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, so they clearly haven't gone. Yeah. I mean, and we
what
talked
that will
about
look like, we don't know, but I mean, reactions are still there.
I think from looking and dissecting what Kerry said, it seemed to me that reactions cost points now. And do you remember? If we remember the article or the bit he found, the image he found, it was like reaction. This costs 2 points to do. So
yes, okay. So that's almost like the kind of 40k.
Yeah,
I can't think what they call it.
Command points.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't hate that because that just adds an element of management. I wonder.
Yeah. Well, I think that the article kind of suggested that if you build a broad and balanced list, then your army is going to get more buffs. And I wonder whether, basically, like if you bring a broad and balanced list, it's got lots of tactical marines in it and things like that.
Yeah,
you get more reaction points, more of a tactical allotment. And then it forces. And then if you're just taking an army of dreadnoughts, you get like one reaction point. And then,
I guess so. With that, I think what happened when 40k first, I think it was 8th edition, I don't really know 40k, is it almost became the thing of maximizing your command points. So it almost became so I guess hopefully they have learned from that mistake, and it won't just be a case of I have 15,000 reactions this turn because I've maximized my command points
in the shooting phase.
Sorry, we're going off track there a bit, but okay, that's interesting.
Okay, well, the next one was routed, and then this is typically what we would see. We would describe this as like failing morale check and falling back. Basically, this is what this is, and the way they describe it is basically you run towards your. They said in the article you run towards your board edge, and you run away. So routed status.
Yeah, and it did say that you can run off the board as well.
Yeah, so that seems to be all the same. So, and it's the same in the sense that it's you check against your lead. Well, I assume you check against your leadership. Again, it didn't quite say how you fail the check. It says how you recover from the check, but in the article it didn't necessarily say how you.
No,
unless we missed it. But we are assuming that the first three against cool and this one is against leadership. So basically, if you suffer 25% casualties or more in a single phase, then you have to make the check, and then it could mean that you're running away. And we'll come to this panic rule in a second. We'll discuss this in a bit, but just to touch on this now, it says the new Panic X special rule can also inflict routage should they successfully wound as part of an attack. Now, we'll talk about what Panic X could mean in a second. Let's go to the next bit, though. Because they also gave us just a little few kind of like cheeky morsels of information about weapons. Now, they did say in the article, I think at the end of the article, we're going to be looking at weapons more in detail later in the week. And I'm going to assume that tomorrow we're going to get a lore episode about, or lore article about Malcador, because he was also in the video, and they've done Kroll and Baldor. And then Friday, I'm going to assume that this is going to be about the weapons. So it said in the article, so rotor cannons previously performed poorly against Space Marine armor. That's true. It was AP dash, so it didn't do great, and it was a low strength. It's now a highly efficient, fully automatic pinning machine. Tactical Marines will dive for cover under its withering hail. Now, I just want to, just maybe because we've all forgotten what happened and what things happens in 2.0, that the rotor cannon already was quite a pinning machine. It already had assault for pinning, and also it had shell shock as well. So I don't know if they're trying to suggest that, hey, maybe it's going to be better against armor than it was. Perhaps it's going to be AP4 or AP5 or something like that. But unless it's going to be AP3, I think it's still going to be the same. Like, it's still going to cause pinning in the similar way. So that was interesting, because it's just like, well, it was before a pinning machine, and it's going to continue to be a pinning machine. But it does lead us nicely, I think, to the next part, which is about flamers. So it did so. A couple of things about flamers. So we haven't really seen, on the whole, flamers that much this edition. Some of you might be watching being this, I always take flamers in my list. I understand that. I often took flamers on my Leviathans. I thought that they always performed quite well. However,
never took flamers on my Leviathans,
but
never.
They were not the meta choice for most legions. For Salamanders, the Dragon Breath flamers, they were pretty good. Snap shooting on a D6 was always massively valuable. But we didn't see them a lot. And part of the reason why we didn't see them a lot is that Heavy basically re-rolled saves. So if you were like a Terminator and you were just like a Cataphracti Terminator, and then you didn't really worry too much about flamers, because you were just all those ones, I'm going to re-roll those. And
it's twofold, isn't it? You've got a close range weapon, so you've got to get close to use it, and then once you use it, your opponent's re-rolling their saves. It's just never really going to achieve a huge amount, is it?
No. So what they seem to have done to address this is introduce a new rule called Panic X. Now, if they're introducing new rules, I wonder if they've taken away other rules, but we shall see. And to see whether or not, I mean, they talks about flamers benefiting from this as if it's like, I think we would be foolish to assume that flamers are the only thing with Panic X, but it could be that that it is, but I assume not. So flamers weapons benefit greatly from this new system. The new Panic X special rule found on most flame weapons, interesting, it says most actually, and other similar pieces of war gear can also inflict routage should they successfully wound as part of an attack. So, you know, let's go with a heavy flamer.
I mean, that's pretty huge, really, isn't it? Just off the bat, just taking that snapshot of the rules, that is pretty good.
Yeah, so let's go with let's just go with a heavy flamer has panic 1, and then your tactical squad, they lose a wound, just one wound from that, and I assume that they're going to have to take a leadership check at -1. But what I don't know, a couple of things, is whether the Panic X just kicks in even if you lost one wound, or whether actually you still need to have lost 25% and then the Panic X kicks in as well. So
well, I mean, I presume it says kicks in, doesn't it?
Well, if you go back to the page,
should they successfully wound as part of an attack?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So actually maybe you don't need to lose the 25%.
No, because otherwise you're just doing a panic attack. check.
Yeah. So yeah, and for tactical marines that are checking on the sergeant's leadership, checking on a 7, you're like, ooh, that's actually not too good. I could.
Sergeants were leadership 8, weren't they? Were
Yeah, but
they?
they would have to. But if it like in that
Oh,
heavy,
sorry. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if it's panic
Sorry. Yeah,
1,
yeah,
they'd
yeah,
have to
yeah,
check on a
yeah.
7, right? So,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
which is pretty nasty. So because you're gonna fail one of those 3-up saves against like a whole host of heavy flamers. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I like that a lot. I, w- one thing I would say about all these rules, all these statuses, stati, is it gives you the ability to make different weapons do different things.
Yeah.
And we kind of already had that with pinning, like you say, and yeah, rotor cannons still kind of didn't really do much because they were toughness free. You basically never wounded, and then when you did wound, like it would be saved, and that
Yeah.
was it. It would be interesting to see if we get rid of artificer armor. I really hope so, because that would make them better. Because then your
Oh my
sergeant's not
God.
tanking 15
Yeah.
2+
Yeah.
saves.
Yeah.
But just with things like stunned, because obviously people weren't taking like artillery because they got rid of AP2 strength 10 artillery, which thank fuck they got rid of that because it was just dog shit. It was just
Yeah,
boring.
it's horrible, yeah.
And anyone who says that wasn't boring, they were running. They were
Four
running.
Medusas, right?
Yeah. Because it's just boring. But they've almost gone the opposite way, where they've completely nerfed it that no one took it. Whereas this brings it back a little bit in the fact that you don't have to be removing entire units, but now, you're affecting that unit in other ways, i.e. they're stunned or whatever. That's what I really like about this, is you're just adding options to weapons.
Yeah.
So, you might not be taking a weapon. I mean, again, we're just guessing because we don't actually know, but you might not take a weapon to be like, well, I want to take that weapon because it's going to kill lots of things. You might be taking a weapon because you're like, well, actually, that weapon is going to stun lots of things.
Yeah.
And I just want it to stun. I don't necessarily want it
I
to
want it.
kill.
I want it to stun. This unit I've taken here is designed to stun heavy weapon squads.
Yeah, that's it,
because
there.
I have a deep striking unit coming in later in the game, and therefore I'm taking this in order to hamper people's reactions. Whatever.
And that's what I'm excited about. This is I think it adds options to weapons that you probably wouldn't. I mean, let's face it. Second edition was fucking Gravis melter cannons and las cannons.
Yeah, that was the edition, was that? Yeah,
like and the some absolute whackers were taking conversion beamers. But pretty much everyone, it was, it's rare autocannons did well, but it's rare you saw them, on certain units you'd see them. But I think when you can add rules like this in, like I say, you're making certain weapons potentially do something a bit better. And but the first thing I think of, obviously, as an Iron Warriors player, is you can actually make artillery that kind of does its job. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting as well, like, because from a balance point of view for this edition, are they going to say, look, Volko, we're going to keep the same. Like, it's 5 shots and it's deflagrate, and we're just going to keep that the same. But what we're going to do is we're going to give suppress to heavy bolters, like
and
that's
what I like, because heavy bolters are pretty good. But
well, I guess we'll find out hopefully more on Friday about that. But I wonder whether rather than nerfing certain weapons, whether they've just gone, we'll just make all the other weapons like a more interesting choice and a more competitive choice.
I really hope that's what they've done. I hope they haven't just whacked a special rule on every single weapon, because then it just gets boring, doesn't it? Because then you take away the option. It's like, well, that last cannon has stunned, so what's the point in taking this thing that has you know what I mean?
I know exactly what I mean.
So okay,
well, let's have a look at all the tactical statuses, the way they explained it in the article. So the 4 tactical statuses all have the same. They have unique effects, which we've gone through already, but they all have common drawbacks as well. So it sounds like if you have suffered any one of those 4 tactical statuses, your charge is going to become disordered, although if you're falling back, then you're not going to be charging. But if you are stunned and you charge, I think, is that possible? I'm not sure. then because that's going to be interesting actually. So pinning means you can't move, but I wonder whether you can pin and charge. That's going to be an interesting one. So charges become disordered, troops fight last in most combats, and then they are unable to capture objectives as well. So some of these are pretty
Okay.
they're pretty. I mean, those three are all pretty harsh, particularly the capturing objectives.
I'm just going to skip back to this. So, yeah, okay.
So you're pinned, which stops you from moving, and also now you can't score, and you
Can't charge. But you
well,
can
can't charge. Well, we'll see if you can do that. And there was the other one as well. And if you're suppressed, shots fight last, and then shots fly wide. You now can't score, and all those things as well. So there is, I guess, the main one, and then these are kind of like all the others that go along with it as well. So yeah, interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
So these, I mean, if you fail these are pretty devastating for your game. And then finally, and the parenthesis in this sentence confused us when we were reading it a little bit, because I don't think, and again, correct us if we're wrong, I don't think in the article it ever said, how you fail or what the test is checked against in order to fail it. I think it may have been in the previous article where it might have said about 2d6 and checking on the cool test, and that's how we're going to assume, with the exception of the leadership one. But it did also explain how you get past it and get over it, which is units test on their advanced characteristics at the end of their turn to see if they recover. So if I shoot Lee and I suppress one of his units, at the end of his next turn, he will then check and that unit can come up again, and then hopefully I can then suppress him again. So I don't know whether or not first turn is going to be even more brutal. I'm not sure. It depends on the level.
Savage, couldn't it? If you just kept failing your test, you could have half your army. If you go second,
but that was the same. So what you could argue is, well, that's the same as pinning. But the problem is, what we don't know is how many of these weapons now have now have these 4 statuses attached to them, because flamers apparently can just cause people to run away just from a single win. So anyway, so it also said when you're checking, so call in order to get back up and behave as normal, call for pin, suppress the stunned, and then leadership for the routed check, which is for the routed check, that's standard, we know that one, and then call for pinning, suppress and stunned. But again, I mean, just to emphasize, I'm sure there are going to be other ways to buff your cool and buff your leadership. Like maybe your Primarch might give you +1 cool across the board, right? Maybe a Herald or some sort of console choice allows you to increase cool in a unit or whatever.
Or maybe Vexilla's.
Increase cool, right? Inspirational. So it'll be interesting to see how these things have changed now. Does a Herald affect just because it's interesting, like a Herald now, if it just affects leadership, that is not going to help you on a pin, suppress and stun check. It's going to help you on the fleeing check, but not necessarily on the other checks, because that Herald was so valuable because it was just like, like that weapons causes pinning, but I literally don't care. I pass all pinning and row checks. So the dominance of the Herald of this edition might have dwindled a little bit as well.
Or the Herald might just be like, you ignore everything.
Yeah, exactly right.
We don't know, do we?
Yeah, no, we don't know. But that leads us to the end of the article. It looks like there's going to be another article on Friday, fingers crossed, but my money is on Malcador Law article tomorrow. But let us know what you guys think. Let us know your thoughts. We'd be really happy to hear them in the comments down below. We're going to round it up there, and we'll see you hopefully on Friday for another one of these brief analysis of the rules. So anyway, take care guys, and we shall see you on the next one.
See ya.
Bye.